The Echo in My Life, Chapter 1, The Waking Nightmare. The silence, it was a dull roar, a pressure behind my eyes. Then a flicker, a light, too bright. A face, blurry at first, slowly swam into focus. Mark, my husband. His eyes, usually so vibrant, seemed distant, hollow, and next to him, a small, familiar face. Lily, my daughter, my sweet Lily. I tried to speak. My lips felt like lead. A strange, rasping sound escaped. Not words, just a guttural choke. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the lingering fog of unconsciousness. Mark leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "Ellie, can you hear me? It's Mark. You're awake. After all this time." His voice was soft, gentle, but it held an odd, almost rehearsed quality. Awake. 8 months. That's what the date on the wall calendar told me. 8 months since the accident. The crumpled metal, the searing pain, the darkness. I was in a hospital bed, tubes snaked from my arms. My left side felt numb, useless. Lily, my 8-year-old, usually so boisterous, stood quietly by Mark's side. She looked different. Her hair, usually a wild tangle of curls, was meticulously braided. She clutched a new, brightly colored stuffed animal, a unicorn. She never liked unicorns. She loved dragons. "Mommy?" Lily's voice was small, hesitant. She didn't rush to my side. She didn't throw her arms around me. She just stood there, her gaze flickering to Mark. My heart ached. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I tried again to speak, to tell them I was here. I was Ellie, their Ellie, but only a garbled whisper emerged. My throat felt raw, my tongue thick. Mark exchanged a glance with a nurse who hovered discreetly in the background. "It's okay, Ellie," he said, his voice soothing. Too soothing. "Take your time. Dr. Petrova says it's normal. You've been through a lot." Normal? Nothing about this felt normal. As the days blurred into a painful, slow awakening, I began to see and to understand. The changes in the hospital room. My favorite framed photo, usually on the bedside table, was gone, replaced by a generic landscape print. Mark's new haircut, shorter, sharper. He never liked short hair. Lily's new obsession with unicorns. It was all wrong. And then I saw her. In the reflection of the hospital room window, my sister, Isabelle, Izzy, my twin, standing next to Mark, her hand resting on his arm. Her eyes, identical to mine, held a strange, watchful intensity. Izzy, my twin, the artist, the dreamer, the one who always felt overshadowed. Our relationship had always been complicated, a dance of love and resentment. I remembered her last visit, just days before the accident. She was desperate, asking for money again. I had refused, firmly. She'd left in a huff, her eyes blazing with a familiar bitterness. Now, she was here, in my room, next to my husband, next to my daughter, and they were looking at her, talking to her, calling her Mommy. No, a silent scream tore through my mind. This wasn't right. This was a nightmare, a horrifying, waking nightmare. My life, my family, occupied, stolen by my own sister, and no one seemed to notice. Dr. Lena Petrova, my neurologist, came for her rounds. She was a brilliant woman, sharp, empathetic. I tried to reach her, to tell her. My eyes, my good hand, twitched desperately. I focused all my remaining strength. "Dr. Petrova," I rasped, my voice a painful, broken plea. "Izzy, she's not me." Dr. Petrova leaned closer, her brow furrowed with concern. "It's all right, Ellie. Take your time. We'll get you to speech therapy. Your brain is healing. It just needs time to reconnect the pathways." She didn't understand. How could she? Izzy, standing beside her, looked at me with an unreadable expression. A flicker of something. Triumph? Fear? It was impossible to tell. Her face was a perfect mask. My face. I was trapped, in my own body, in my own nightmare, while my sister, my own twin, lived my life, slept in my bed, kissed my husband, held my daughter, and no one knew. Chapter 2. The Silent Scream. The days crawled by, each one a torment. My body was a prison, my voice a broken instrument, my mind, sharp and clear, screamed in silent horror. Izzy was a master of illusion. She moved through my life with a chilling precision. She wore my clothes, her hair styled exactly like mine. Her mannerisms, her laugh, it was all a perfect, chilling imitation. She would visit me in the hospital, often with Mark and Lily, and she'd act the part of the distraught sister. "Poor Ellie," she'd murmur, her voice a soft echo of my own. "It's so hard to see her like this." Her eyes, though, would flicker to mine, a subtle, cold gleam, a silent challenge. Lily's distance was a constant knife in my heart. She would hug Izzy, call her mommy, my own daughter. It was unbearable. Mark, he seemed oblivious, or perhaps unwilling to see. He treated Izzy with a comfortable familiarity that made my stomach churn. He would talk about their day, about a new restaurant they'd tried, about Lily's school play rehearsals, all the mundane, beautiful details of my life, his life, their life, that Izzy had usurped. Dr. Petrova, my neurologist, was the only one who seemed to truly see me. She focused on my cognitive recovery. She asked me questions, simple ones at first. My name, the date. She was amazed by my clarity of mind, despite my physical limitations. "Ellie, your brain function is remarkable," she'd say, her voice full of professional admiration. "The neural pathways are firing. It's just the physical connection that's slow. We'll get you back." I tried to use her words, to convey my truth. I pointed to Izzy. I gestured to myself. I tried to shake my head, to mouth words. "She's not me." But Izzy, ever watchful, would smoothly intervene. "Ellie's frustrated, Dr. Petrova. She's tired of being stuck here. She wants to be home with us." Her voice so perfectly modulated, so perfectly me. Dr. Petrova would nod, her brow furrowed. She noticed Mark's detachment, his strange, calm acceptance of this prolonged trauma. She noticed Izzy's almost encyclopedic knowledge of my medical history, details only a husband or a direct family member would know. She saw the perfection of Izzy's demeanor. It was almost too perfect. A tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in Dr. Petrova's mind. One day, Izzy brought Lily to visit alone. Mark was at work. Izzy sat by my bed, braiding Lily's hair. Lily chattered away about school, about a new friend. Izzy smiled. She laughed. She was everything I should have been. Lily, distracted for a moment, dropped her unicorn. It landed near my good hand. a surge of desperate inspiration. I struggled. My hand, still weak, twitched. I reached for a nearby pen. My fingers fumbled. I gripped it, my knuckles white. My mind raced. How could I make them understand? I couldn't speak. My body wouldn't obey. But I could draw. I was an architect. Plans, blueprints, symbols. They were my language. I dragged the pen across the pristine white hospital feet. My hand shook. The lines were unsteady, but the intention was clear. I drew a rectangle. Our house. The large windows overlooking Puget Sound. Then smaller figures. Mark, Lily. And then a figure on a bed. Me, with tubes. And next to them, another figure. Taller, smiling. A perfect, almost identical copy of me. And then, with immense effort, I scrawled letters beneath her. I-Z-Z-Y. Lily, looking for her unicorn, saw my frantic scribbling. "Mommy, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice tinged with childish annoyance. Izzy looked up. Her eyes, usually so composed, widened. A flash of alarm. A flicker of panic. For the first time, her mask slipped. She moved quickly. Too quickly. She snatched the pen from my hand, crumpled the sheet. Her smile, now tight, strained. "Ellie's just scribbling, sweetie. She gets restless." But Dr. Mandor. Petrova was due any moment. I had to try again. I had to break free. Chapter 3. The Architect's Whisper. Dr. Petrova entered my room moments later. Izzy, composed once more, was chatting easily with her. Lily, having retrieved her unicorn, was distracted by a children's show on the room's TV. "Good morning, Ellie," Dr. Petrova said, her voice warm. She began her examination, checking my reflexes, my eye movements. I focused. I had to. My good hand, still trembling, reached out. I pointed to the crumpled sheet on the floor. Izzy stiffened, but Dr. Petrova, observant, noticed my gesture. She stooped, picked up the sheet. She smoothed it out. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned my crude drawing. The house, Mark, Lily, me on the bed, and Izzy standing beside them. The hastily scrawled letters, Izzy. Dr. Petrova looked at me. Her brow furrowed. Her gaze shifted to Izzy, who was now unnaturally still. A subtle, almost imperceptible tension radiated from her. "Ellie," Dr. Petrova said, her voice low, professional. "Are you trying to tell me something about Izzy?" I nodded, violently. Tears streamed down my face. My breath came in ragged gasps. Izzy stepped forward, her voice a little too high. "Dr. Petrova, Ellie's just confused. It's the trauma. She's been through so much." "Ellie's mind is remarkably clear, Isabelle," Dr. Petrova said, her tone firm. She turned back to me. "Ellie, if you can, try to write again. Something simpler. Your name, and what you need." I struggled again. My fingers cramped, but I focused on my deep yearning, my desperation. I scrawled, "Help," and then, beneath it, "Lily, my daughter, my beautiful, innocent daughter. I had to save her. From Izzy." Dr. Petrova's eyes widened. She looked at Izzy, a long, silent stare. The seed of doubt had blossomed into a full-blown suspicion. "Isabelle," Dr. Petrova said, her voice now cold, clinical. "I need to speak with Ellie alone. Please leave the ring." Izzy's composure finally cracked. Her face flushed. Her jaw tightened. "But I'm her sister, her primary caregiver." "No," Dr. Petrova countered, her voice unwavering. Her primary caregiver is her husband, Mark, and her doctor is me. Please, step outside. Izzy hesitated, then turned and walked out, her movements stiff. Lily, sensing the tension, looked from Izzy to me, her small face filled with confusion. Once Izzy was gone, Dr. Petrova leaned close to me. Ellie, tell me, what's happening? I tried. I pointed to my drawing. I made gestures. I formed words with my lips. Painful and slow. She, living, my life. My husband. My Lily. Dr. Petrova listened intently, her expression grim. She's pretending to be you? Your sister? Since the accident? I nodded. Tears streamed down my face. Dr. Petrova's face was a mask of professional calm, but her eyes held a profound shock. Ellie, this is incredible, but I believe you. Your mind is clear, and some things didn't add up. Mark's odd behavior, Isabelle's knowledge of your private medical details. It was all a little too perfect. She paused. We need concrete proof, Ellie. How do we get it? My mind raced. How? I remembered my old laptop, my secret diary, a place I poured out my deepest thoughts, my fears, my feelings about Izzy. No one knew about it, not even Mark. Izzy couldn't have known. If she was truly me, she would, but she wasn't. I gestured to my head, then to a typing motion, then to a specific word. Diary. Petrova nodded slowly. A diary, electronic, on a laptop? I nodded. Yes. Do you know where it is? I pointed to my good hand, then drew a small, quick rectangle. Our bedside table, at home. Dr. Petrova understood. Ellie, this is dangerous. Isabelle is clearly desperate. We need outside help. Someone who can investigate discreetly. My mind conjured a name. A man I trusted. A brilliant, unyielding private detective. Miles Corbin. He had helped me with a complex legal case years ago. He was relentless. He was discreet. And he had a deep sense of justice. I pointed to the wall, then to my name tag, and then slowly, painfully, I traced the letters in the air. Milescorbin. Dr. Petrova's eyes widened. Miles Corbin? The detective? You want me to contact him? I nodded, with all the conviction I could muster. Yes, he was my only hope, my only way out. Chapter 4. The Shadow Detective. Dr. Lena Petrova was a woman of action. She believed me. That was the first miracle. The second was her quiet, methodical approach. She understood the delicacy, the potential danger. She didn't alert Mark. She didn't alert the hospital administration. Not yet. She went to my room when Izzy wasn't there. She found my old tablet, miraculously still charged. And she found a way to access the internet. I, with my weak hand, typed slowly, painfully, a message to Miles Corbin, my sister, Isabelle Vance. She's pretending to be me. Eleanor Vance. I've been in a coma for 8 months. She's living my life with my husband, my daughter. My life has been stolen. My daughter Lily is in danger. Please, investigate, discreetly. Save Lily. I typed my hospital room number and Dr. Petrova's contact. Miles Corbin. I knew he would act. He was a man of his word. The days that followed were a blur of frustration and simmering fear. Izzy, now overtly suspicious, limited Lily's visits. She watched me with a cold, unsettling gaze. but she still played the role. The concerned sister, the dutiful aunt, the perfect lie. Petrova continued her neurological assessments. Her questions were now subtly probing, testing my awareness, my memory. She spoke in hushed tones about cognitive dissonance and post-coma delusions to deflect Izzy's suspicions, while simultaneously confirming my clarity of mind. Meanwhile, Miles Corbin, the shadow detective, was in motion. His first step, discreetly contacting the hospital. He posed as a family friend, inquiring about my progress. He charmed the nurses. He gathered subtle observations. He learned about Isabelle, the twin who had been such a rock for the family. He noted the perfection of her performance, the lack of genuine grief in Mark, the way Lily seemed to navigate between two mommies with an unsettling ease. His instincts screamed. Something was wrong. He began to investigate Mark. Financial records, lawyers. He discovered an unusual series of large transfers from Mark's personal accounts to an offshore account shortly after my accident. Funds that were not related to my medical care. Funds that coincided with Izzy's sudden appearance. He found an anonymous tip he'd received months ago from a disgruntled night nurse who had been assigned to my care in the early weeks of my coma. The nurse had reported strange inconsistencies. Isabelle had been too familiar with my medical history. She had often dismissed the nurse's concerns about my fluctuations in vital signs. She had even tried to restrict my access to visitors early on. The nurse had been too intimidated to go public, but she'd set the tip to Corbin, known for his discretion. Now, it made chilling sense. Corbin also investigated Izzy's recent past. He discovered her failing art career, her mounting debts, the sale of her small studio apartment, leaving her virtually homeless and destitute just weeks before my accident. A motive. Desperation. He knew he needed more. He needed to get inside my house, my home. He needed hard evidence. He found it in the unlikeliest of places. Publicly available security footage from a nearby traffic camera facing the entrance to my subdivision. He spent hours reviewing it, frame by frame. He saw Izzy entering and exiting my house consistently for 8 months. He saw her taking Lily to school, picking her up. He saw Mark. He saw their interactions, so normal, so terrifyingly seamless. But then he found an earlier clip from just a few weeks after my accident, a different car, a small, older sedan. It pulled up to my house. Izzy got out. She seemed hesitant. She approached my front door. She paused, and then she took out a key, my key, and let herself in, not as a grieving sister, but as someone taking possession. He also found old photos of me and Izzy, side by side. The similarities were striking, but the subtle differences, the way Izzy held herself, a slight curl to her lip, a different light in her eyes. He now knew how to tell us apart. He reached out to Dr. Petrova. He shared his findings. Dr. Petrova, in turn, shared her medical observations, my clear cognitive function, the physical discrepancies, the impossible truth that was unfolding. They knew they had enough. They had to act. Before Izzy, sensing the net tightening, vanished, or worse. Chapter 5. The Unraveling Thread. The day of reckoning arrived with the stark, cold light of a Seattle morning. Miles Corbin, silent and resolute, entered my hospital room, accompanied by Dr. Petrova. Izzy, ever the perfect performer, was already there. Discussing my recovery with a visiting therapist, Mark was absent, thankfully. Corbin's eyes, usually so impassive, held a deep gravity. He carried a tablet. Isabelle. Corbin's voice cut through the polite chatter, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. We need to talk. Izzy turned, her smile faltering. Her eyes, identical to mine, darted between Corbin and Dr. Petrova. She knew. Corbin didn't mince words. He laid out the evidence. The financial transfers, the security footage, the inconsistencies in her story, the anonymous nurse's tip, my clear mental state, my drawing, the plea for help. Izzy's face, usually so perfectly composed, began to crumble. Her carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing the raw desperation beneath. You don't understand, she hissed, her voice low, furious. Ellie was in a coma. She was dying. Mark was falling apart. Lily was losing her mother. Someone had to step in. Someone had to keep the family together. And that someone was you? Dr. Petrova interjected, her voice laced with disgust. Taking advantage of a man's grief? Exploiting a child's vulnerability? Usurping a woman's life? It wasn't like that. Izzy's voice rose, edged with hysteria. I just wanted to help. I only intended it to be temporary. But then, it felt so good. To be Ellie. To be loved. To be seen. For once. Corbin pressed on. The money, Isabelle. The offshore accounts. Was that helping? Izzy flushed. Mark offered it. As a thank you for everything I was doing. A lie. I knew it. He had been blackmailed, coerced. Just then, Mark walked into the room, carrying a fresh bouquet of flowers. He stopped dead, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. He looked at Izzy, then at Corbin and Dr. Petrova, his eyes wide with confusion. What's going on? Mark asked, his voice uneasy. Corbin turned to Mark, his expression unwavering. Mr. Vance, we have reason to believe that Isabelle has been impersonating your wife, Eleanor, since the accident, for the past 8 months. Mark's face went white. The flowers slipped from his grasp, scattering across the floor. He stared at Izzy, then at me. His eyes, for the first time in months, filled with dawning horror. No, he whispered, his voice trembling. Isabelle, tell them it's not true. Izzy's facade completely shattered. Tears streamed down her face. Not tears of remorse, but of desperate self-pity. He forced me, she shrieked, pointing at Mark. He knew I was poor. He threatened to expose me if I didn't comply. He said Lily needed a mother. He needed me to be her. He pushed me into this. Mark stared at her, his jaw dropping. He knew what she was doing, twisting the narrative, turning him into the villain. Corbin, however, remained unmoved. Isabelle, we have your bank records, the offshore transfers, the nurse's sworn testimony, Mark's distress after the accident, and we have Eleanor's testimony, her clear, consistent statement. He turned to Mark. Mr. Vance, we know you were grieving. We know you were vulnerable. But Isabelle's claims, they don't align with the evidence. Did you know she was impersonating your wife? Mark's shoulders slumped. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound despair. The guilt, the shame, it was agonizingly clear. I didn't know at first, Mark stammered, his voice choked with emotion. She just showed up. She was so kind, so reassuring. She said Lily needed a mother, that she could be Ellie for a little while, until Ellie recovered. I was so desperate, so broken. I agreed. But then she started to change. She became demanding. She threatened to expose me, to tell everyone I was complicit, to take Lily away. He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Ellie. So incredibly sorry. I was so lost. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to stop her." Izzy, seeing her charade fully exposed, turned on her heel. She bolted for the door, desperate to escape. But Corbin was faster. He blocked her path. His movements swift, decisive. "Isabelle Vance," Corbin stated, his voice ringing with authority. "You're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and endangerment of a minor." Izzy screamed, a raw, guttural sound of rage and despair. She struggled, fighting against Corbin's firm grip. "You can't. You don't understand. I was supposed to be Ellie. I always was. It was my life too." The room filled with the sounds of her struggle, the arrival of hospital security, the cold, final click of handcuffs. Izzy was led away, still screaming, her eyes wide with a desperate, unhinged fury. Mark, devastated, looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Lily, who had been hiding behind the therapist, now looked at me, her little face etched with confusion and fear. I was finally free, but the path to healing, it was just beginning. Chapter 6: The Long Road Home. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, psychiatric evaluations, and agonizing conversations. Isabelle Vance was indeed committed to a mental health facility. Her fragile psyche, unable to cope with a lifetime of perceived failure and comparison, had broken. She truly believed she was meant to be me. Mark faced his own reckoning, the public shame, the legal ramifications, but his profound guilt and remorse were genuine. He spent hours by my bedside, begging for forgiveness, explaining his despair, his fear for Lily. I saw the broken man beneath the successful lawyer, and slowly, painfully, I began to understand, to forgive, not for what he allowed, but for the depths of his grief that made him vulnerable. My physical recovery was arduous. The paralysis was extensive, but my mind was clear, and my determination fierce. I worked tirelessly in physical therapy, each small movement a triumph. Mark was there, every step of the way. He became my shadow, my rock, his devotion unwavering. Lily, my sweet Lily, she was the most delicate part of the healing. She was confused, hurt. The world she knew had been a lie. Dr. Petrova, along with a child psychologist, helped us navigate her trauma. Lily started spending more time with me, sitting by my bed, talking about her day. Slowly, she began to trust me again, to call me mommy without hesitation, to bring me her dragons, abandoning the unicorn. It was a long, painful process, but with each small step, our bond reformed. Stronger than before. My return home, 8 months after Izzy had taken over, was filled with a complex mix of emotions. The house felt both familiar and alien. Every room held echoes of Izzy's presence, her adjustments, her touches. Mark, consumed by guilt, offered to sell it, but I shook my head. This was my home, our home, and we would reclaim it, every inch. We repainted rooms, we rearranged furniture, we filled it with our memories, our laughter. The old framed photo, my favorite, was back on my bedside table. Lily's drawings adorned the fridge. We slowly, painstakingly erased Izzy's shadow. My architecture career was on hold, but my passion remained. I started sketching again, using my good hand, redesigning spaces in my mind, imagining a world where every corner held truth and light. Dr. Petrova became a dear friend. Her belief in me, her quiet courage, had saved my life. And Miles Corbin, he became a silent guardian. He ensured Isabelle received the help she needed. He kept an eye on us, a quiet assurance in the background. The experience had changed me profoundly. I was no longer the confident, perhaps slightly naive architect. I was stronger, more resilient, more empathetic. I had faced the ultimate betrayal, the theft of my very identity, and I had reclaimed it. I learned the true meaning of resilience, of forgiveness, of the unbreakable bond of family, even when it's shattered. One evening, Mark sat beside me reading to Lily. Her head was nestled against my good shoulder. Mark's hand rested gently on my arm. A quiet peace settled over us. I looked at Mark, then at Lily. We had been through a nightmare, a betrayal, but we had emerged, stronger, more connected. My voice, though still a little weak, was mine again. My life, my identity, my family. The echo of Izzy's pretense still lingered, a faint, chilling memory, but it was fading, replaced by the resonant sound of our own laughter, our own love. The long road home was far from over, but we were on it, together. And this time, there were no hidden echoes, no unspoken lies, just the clear, true sound of our lives.